Hey guys, this is Fadin again. Now, in this part 1 video, I want to show you how you can build your Tekton tasks so that you can test them, run them before you finalize your Tekton pipeline. Now, in this part 1, we will focus on Tekton tasks. In part 2, we will focus on creating our pipeline and then adding and mixing all of these tasks together so that we can shape our final Tekton pipeline from an end-to-end kind of perspective. Now, before we jump into the demo, let's refresh our brain of what exactly is Tekton. As I mentioned in an earlier video, Tekton is actually an open source project that provides a framework to create cloud-native CI/CD pipelines quickly. Now, Tekton is actually based on Kubernetes native framework, and this makes it very easy to be deployed onto your Kubernetes cluster. And it's leveraging and using the custom resources definition, the CRDs in Kubernetes, which basically means that if you are familiar with Kubernetes resources, how to write YAML file for your deployment files, services, routes, for example, in Openshift, etc., then writing Tekton pipelines would not be much of a problem for you because Tekton pipeline resources are actually YAML files. Now, that being said, and before we jump into the actual demo or tutorial on how to create the tasks, let's understand some of the concepts when it comes to the Tekton pipeline components. So I found this very interesting and very nicely put Openshift blog post about the Tekton pipelines, because I think in the version 4.x, Tekton is going to be the main CI/CD tool for deploying applications to the Openshift cluster. Now, as you can see here, Tekton CICD pipeline is composed of 5 components or concepts. Now, the first one is task, the second is pipeline, pipeline resource, task run, and pipeline run. Let's start with the task. A task is a sequence of commands or steps that are run in a separate containers in a pod. What does this mean is that basically, let's say that we want to create a CI/CD pipeline to deploy our Java microservice backend application, okay, to the Kubernetes or to the OpenShift cluster. So basically, we are going to be creating a task manifest where we actually name it or call it Java microservice or Java backend 1. And then within this task, we will have multiple of steps. The first step, it can be cloning the Git repository. The second step, it can be building the actual code. The third step, to do some unit testing, to do some integration or performance testing. And then the fourth step is to actually go and deploy it to the Kubernetes environment. Now, every step is actually going to be running in a separate containers in a pod. Now, the second element here is the pipeline. A pipeline, from its name, is a collection of tasks that are going to be executed in a defined order. So what will happen is that from the diagram, if you can see here, now the pipeline can have one task at least and up to plus n number of tasks. So you will be designing all your tasks. So you will be designing all your tasks, and you will be adding all your steps or commands within these tasks. And then you will be adding these tasks within the pipeline. And then there is something called the pipeline resource. And this is actually where the inputs of this pipeline. For example, the Git repository is actually a required input for the pipeline so that you can achieve or you can complete your pipeline. And the output, for example, of the pipeline, in this case, for example, it can be image registry to actually create an image of the application, and then you push it to the image registry within your Kubernetes or OpenShift cluster. So you can see from this diagram also, we have something else called the task run and the pipeline run. This two, I noticed that so many people, they get confused when it comes to the task run and pipeline run. Basically, the task run is just an execution of the task. It's just a representation of the task execution. What it means is that basically you will be designing your tasks, or you will be designing your steps within the tasks here, and then you will have a task run that actually going to call or execute the actual task itself. This might be a little bit confusing because in the normal, usual CI/CD kind of tools, what happens is that you basically have one file or two files, and then you just list down all your commands within your stages, etc. And then you just hit the execute button or the apply button to that tool, and then the tool will start going through every line and executing every line within every stage. Here in Tekton CICD pipeline, the concept is a bit different. You will have task run executions, okay, for every task, or you might actually have one task run execution for multiple of tasks. I hope this is clear when it comes to the task run. Now the pipeline run is the exact same scenario. You will have multiple of pipelines, or you might need to have multiple of pipelines, and then you will need to create a pipeline run so that you can actually go and execute this pipeline that you actually designed already. So you can notice here, you design your pipeline, your tasks, and then you will have this pipeline run, these tasks run to actually go and execute and run these pipeline and tasks within the Tekton CI/CD pipeline tool. And then of course, once you actually hit the execution button, let's say for example, you design everything and then you go and do the, actually let me write it over here, and then you, for example, do the OC apply-f, let's say your task run.yaml file. Once you hit this button, automatically the pipeline controller is going to detect this, and then it's going to start executing the tasks or executing the steps or commands that you actually put, and then creating the multiple pipeline pods and then multiple containers within this within these pods, etc. So I hope this concept is clear, and the components or the elements within the Tekton CI/CD pipeline is clear for you now. And I think now we can jump into our demo or our tutorial on how to create the task and the task run. In the later video, in the second part, I'm going to talk about the pipeline, and then also how to build the pipeline and how you will have the tasks being referenced within the pipeline, and then how you can actually execute the pipeline run to run your actual pipeline that you designed. Okay, now let's head to our demo. So basically here I'm using an Openshift container platform cluster. You can follow me on Openshift if you have one, or you can follow me on your own Kubernetes, vanilla, or OKD cluster. So for the installation of Tekton pipeline, I recommend you to go to the Tekton pipeline GitHub repo, and then you will see all the step by step. For example, here it says want to start using pipelines. So installing the Tekton pipeline, you click on this one, and then it will give you all the prerequisites, the versions, the installation of the Tekton pipeline, if you want to install it on your Openshift. So you can see all of these step by steps. Assuming that you install the Tekton pipeline on your cluster, you will be able to access the Tekton dashboard. So Tekton, they have a dashboard, and you'll be able to see the pipeline the pipelines, the pipeline runs, the pipeline resources. So for example, here I have two pipeline resources. I have one called Perfect Hello World Git, and I have another one called the Tekton CD Node.js tutorial resources. So I created those two. This one I created for the sake of this video. If you actually click on it, you'll notice that this is going to be the repository that I'm going to use to clone the code and run my task runs. And by the way, you can actually access this repository. I wrote a very small minimal Node.js application over there, and then I put all the task runs and the task configuration, as well as the Openshift deployment files and the services and the routes in there. So if you want to test and play with Tekton and experiment with it, what you can do is just go and clone the repository and then apply the YAML files for the pipeline resource, the task runs, and the tasks, and then you will be able to actually go and execute your task runs. In the later video, I'm going to actually update the repository to include the pipeline runs and as well as the pipelines. Now, if I go to the task section, you can see here that I have two tasks. One called My Node.js build task and the other one called Tekton Node.js tutorial task. Ideally, in your project, you might need to have tens of tasks, maybe even hundreds, depending on how many applications and how complex your steps and stages are. And then, okay, let me actually go and access this one. So you can see that I was running my pipeline for the sake of this video, and then you can see that my pipeline was actually failing a lot of times, and that was due to some technical issues in my configuration before, but things are okay now. Anyway, so if we go to the cluster tasks, now this is going to be from its name, cluster tasks. So this is a tasks that are going to be running on the cluster scope. Okay, not on the namespace for the sake of an application, but it's going to be running on the cluster scope itself. And most probably in the next video, I'll actually be talking about the cluster task as well as the pipeline and the pipeline runs. But for now, we want to keep it simple and clear. We want to focus on the task and the task runs. Now, the task run, you can see here that, as we said before, task run is just an execution or a representation of the task executions. Okay, so whenever we want to run our task, we have to go and apply or create a task run within our Kubernetes cluster. And then automatically Tekton controller is going to be detecting this task run, and then it's going to actually go and start executing the pipeline. So you can see here I have multiple of runs or multiple of executions. Then you can see the task that was run, okay, or the task that was mapped to this task run, and then also the status of this task. All steps have completed executing. For example, if I click on this guy, you will notice here that I have multiple of stages or multiple of steps. So the first one is npm echo message. This is just basically just to test something. So basically I said npm started. And if I want to go and see what exactly is the code for this step, I can click on the status, I can see everything here, and then I can click on the details and I can see the exact code, okay, that was actually executed to fulfill this step or this stage. You can see here the argument that I put echo npm started, and then I executed actually the command for it. Now this step, as I mentioned before, whenever you have a step in your tasks, every step is going to be running in its own container. So basically, when we executed the task run, Openshift or Tekton created a container for us to run the npm echo message, and then another container to run the npm install. So if I go to the logs here, you can see that, well, npm install was executed. I want to see the command itself. I go and click here, and I can see the argument was npm install, and then the command for this argument was actually the bin sh shell access, and then basically -c to run the command, which is npm install. And then you can even see the image here. So basically the image is actually node, and the name of the step is called npm-install. All of these are actually configurable, so you can actually put your own naming style, your own, for example, image, your own also commands, etc. And then there is something very critical here. It's called the working directory. So basically, whenever you run or you execute a task run, you will be having a working directory that's going to be common, okay, or accessible by all your steps or all your containers. And then we have npm run build, the same style, and then you can see, give me something to build. It's just a dummy step or stage here. And then I have the build push image. So basically here I'm using Canico by Google. It's an open source project where basically it allows you to create and build images, okay, within your cluster itself. If I go down, you can see basically what happened is that we have a Node.js version, and then we have it was actually going and executing our Docker file. So how Canico works is another story, but if you want to build your images and then push them to your own registry, okay, within the actual cluster, within the Kubernetes cluster, you can use builda. So I'll just show you here. You can use builda.io, okay, to facilitate the building for your images if you would like to, or you can use Canico GitHub. Google Container Tools, Canico, and then you can actually go scroll down, and then you will see Canico is a tool to build container images from a Docker file inside a container or Kubernetes cluster. And this is very critical, by the way, this statement. Canico does not depend on a Docker daemon and executes each command within a Docker file completely in user space. You don't need to have a Docker daemon to actually go and build the image. Like for example, in your machine, when you install Docker and then you say Docker build, you put the name of the container, you tag the container, and also you put the path of your Docker file, etc. Well, Canico actually solved this issue because in our Kubernetes cluster, we don't have a Docker daemon that we can actually use to build our images. So easily put, just go and use the Canico image and to build your container images. And by the way, how to use it, you can find a very detailed tutorial and even configurations on how to use it for different environments, etc. Going back again to the Tekton dashboard over here for our pipeline, you can see that we have an argument. Now the argument was the Docker file path. So the Docker file, that was the this is the Docker file path, and then here I'm saying caching the build. Basically, I'm putting it through. This is something you can go to the Canico GitHub repo and understand more. We have a destination. Now this is basically an argument that's required by Canico, because once it's built the image, it wants to know where to push this image to. So here I'm putting my Openshift cluster image registry or Docker registry, and this is basically the path. If I go here to my Openshift cluster and then I go to my builds and images, you can see that this is my Docker repository, and this is basically the path to my image, and the tag is the latest tag. Then of course you have the actual command to run or to execute, which is basically the /canico executor, and then you have the image. So you need to actually have this image to run the command with its arguments, and then of course the name of this step, which is called the build-push-image, and the security contest, etc. And then you will see here the input resources for this task run. So our input resources, or our resources that we are using from the pipeline resource within this task run, is actually our GitHub repository. If you click here, you can notice that this is our GitHub repository that I mentioned before in our pipeline resource. This is the one. And then you will notice here that this is the namespace that I'm actually deploying this demo or tutorial application is the web-backend namespace. And then of course you can import your Tekton resources from here, from a repository. Then you can actually have your repository URL for your Tekton resources, and as well as you have the namespace, the repository directory for your Tekton resources, and also you can choose a service account that you want to use when you actually go and run your Tekton pipelines. By the way, this is very critical and very important. Whenever we want to run a task using the task run, or we want to run a pipeline run, we always have to define a specific service account, because we need to put our privileges into these service accounts so that the Canico containers, or so that the Tekton pipeline can actually go and execute or have access to some of our resources on the cluster. For example, here, if I go back again to my IDE, if I click on the task, actually if I click on the task run, you will notice that here I'm using the task, or I'm using the service account called pipeline account. Now this pipeline account, I gave it the permission or the privileges to actually go and create an image and then push the image to my registry, and then as well as to create a pod from this image. So I gave it the access as a push, and then I gave it access as a puller. The last thing here in the dashboard is going to be the webhooks. Once you push any changes to your GitHub repository, automatically the GitHub is going to send a ping, or is going to let the Tekton CICD pipeline know that, hey Tekton, I changed, or my GitHub repository has changed, so please go and execute a specific pipeline run or a specific task run. Okay, so no webhook created under this namespace. For the sake of this demo, I didn't create any webhook, but later on for the second part, I'm going to actually use webhooks to execute my pipeline runs for this one. Okay, so this is my IDE, and let's start with the folder structure. Sorry about the mess here. But anyway, so if you go and clone my GitHub repository, and by the way, I'm going to put the link in the description below. If you go and clone my GitHub repository, the Tekton CICD Node.js tutorial, you will see that I have a pipeline folder and I have an Openshift folder. Now the pipeline folder contains or has the resources or the YAML files that Tekton needs to actually go and execute my task runs. And then my Openshift folder, it has my YAML files to deploy the pod, okay, and creating the routes and the services. So let's start with the PR-Git. So this is basically a pipeline resource. Okay, you can see here we have an API version called tekton-dev/v1alpha1. Now this is going to be the API version that you need to put, and then you will have the kind. Now the kind is going to be the pipeline resource. You remember the 5 concepts or the 5 components within the Tekton CICD pipeline, and this is the one of the kinds, which is called the pipeline resource. And then you need to write the metadata. Okay, same old Kubernetes style, and then you put the name for your pipeline resource. Here I call it Tekton CICD Node.js tutorial resources, and then I put the specification for it to be type Git, and then the parameter for this pipeline resource. Now the second file from here, which is going to be the task.yaml. Now the task.yaml over here, you can notice that again the API version is the same. The kind is going to be the task kind, and then the metadata or the name of the task is called Tekton CICD-Node.js tutorial-task. Specification, and then you have inputs, and then what are the inputs to your task is going to be. So the input is going to be resources, and then I will have here the name of the resource, of the pipeline resource, and the type of the pipeline resource, which is actually Git. So here what's happening is that we're actually referencing from the pipeline resource that we created or we wrote earlier in this pr-git.yaml file. And then we will have the steps. So we will have a multiple of steps here within this task. As I showed you before in the Tekton dashboard, npm echo dash message, and then what is the image of it is node, just a node JS or node image. And then I have the commands that I want to execute. It's basically executing the command echo npm started. And then I have the npm install step. Basically, I'm doing npm install. And then this is the working directory. So basically, I have to guide my step, or I have to guide my task, and I have to tell my task, hey, by the way, Mr. Task, the workspace or the working directory that you need to execute this command, npm install, is actually within this path. And we have the npm build. So again, I'm using the node image, and then I have the command, which is npm run build. okay, to actually go and run this build. And then for the build and push image, okay, I'm using the Canico project image, and the command is basically /canico/executor, which basically it runs or executes these arguments. And the command is canico/executor, and then I have to provide it with these arguments, -- docker file, and then I have to put the path of where exactly is my docker file. And then also, for example, if you want to put a flag to cache things, and another flag for the destination after I create or after I build the image from the source code. I want to push it somewhere, so Canico needs to know where exactly you want to push this. So basically I'm pushing it into my own Docker registry or image registry within the Openshift cluster. And then I have a something called context flag. And basically the context flag means that where is this working directory? Where are we talking about? Where are these resources that you are talking about? And this is basically where is the resources are within this path. Now the last step is the run image. So again, I'm using this ebits OpenShift client image. Actually, if I go back into Google and then I search here, you can see that I'm actually using this image. And basically this image has the OC command line, as I mentioned before, so you can actually leverage this, okay, within your pipeline, but it's always recommended to actually have your own image. Now we have the command, which is basically OC, and then we're executing the arguments on this OC command. So basically apply -f workspace, and then this is basically the path for it. Now the last thing is going to be the task run. Now in the task run, you can see that the kind is going to be task run kind, and the metadata here, I'm not using name, I'm using generate name. I wanted to randomly generate naming or name for me every time we execute the task run. If I go back again to the Tekton dashboard, you can see here that, and I click on task run, you can notice here that every time I'm executing the task run, I'm having a new random, I would say, keywords, okay, or letters for my task run. So basically Tekton CICD Node.js tutorial build task run dash some random numbers and some random letters here being generated. And then of course the namespace. Where do you want to run this task run? Do you want to run it in which namespace? So here I'm running it in my web backend namespace. For the specification for this YAML file, as I mentioned before, service account is a very critical thing because you need to give the right permissions for your pods to actually go and create, or to even go and apply your deployment configs to create routes and to create services, to update the configuration of your routes and services, etc. So you have to use the right permissions on your service account. And now for the inputs for my task run, again, coming back to the inputs, we have a resources. So again, we are going to be referencing our GitHub repository. So Tekton CICD Node.js tutorial resources, as I mentioned it before, over here, the pipeline, the pipeline resource over here. You can see this is the one again. So you need to reference this for your task run. And then you have the task reference, okay? And the task reference is going to be to tell pipeline or to tell Tekton which task do you want to run based on this configurations within your task run. So here I'm saying that, hey, Mr. Task Run, please go and execute my task, which is basically called the Tekton CICD Node.js tutorial task. As simple as that. For example, tomorrow, if I want to have a different task with different steps, etc., what I can do is that just go and change the task name into some new task, and then that's it. So basically, I'll be able to easily reuse my YAML files or to reuse my Tekton assets for multiple of tasks. So now, so the last thing that I want to mention, which is basically the Docker file. Now the Docker file is very simple. Basically, it just points out to the node version 6.11. It's basically creating running the command make dir to create an app folder, copying all the files to the app folder, and then going into the app folder by doing cd or work dir, and then executing the npm install, and then exposing the port 8080, then running the Node.js application. Now, as I mentioned before, within the task step, which is the build push image, the Canico builder is actually executing the Docker file to create our image, and then executing or pushing the image to this destination. So our app or our Node.js application is a very simple one. Hello, I have been deployed by Tekton v1 over here, and then within the Openshift folder over here, I have the deployment configs. So you can see here, this is basically the Openshift typical deployment config file. I have the name here, and I have the specification, replicates one, the strategies, and then I have the specification of my container to be, for example, I'm pointing out to the image registry, and then the image pull policy, and then also the name of the image, and also of course the ports, okay, that I want my container to actually listen to. And then I have my routes over here. Now this route is to actually allow the access to the container, and then I have my service YAML file, which basically means that once you execute the deployment config file, go and execute the service, and then go and create a route to access the pod externally. So what I'm going to do now, I'm actually going to the app.js, and then I'm going to say, I'm going to change this from v1 to v2, for example. And then let me just do clear my command lines here, and then I'm going to do get status. You can see that there is a modification. So I'll just say get add, and then I say get commit -m, and then I will say updated to version 2, for example, and then I will be pushing this to my GitHub repository. So now what I'm going to do is create a new task run, or execute a new task run within my pipeline. So I'm going to do oc apply -f pipeline, and then I'm going to say task run. Okay, actually I'm not going to use apply, I'm going to use a create, because I'm using the generate name. So you are supposed to create a new resource, okay, and not actually apply on the existing resource. So oc create -f pipeline task run, click the enter button, and then you'll see that the task run has been created. If you actually want to see that, you can actually go and copy this, and you say oc get task run tekton-dev, and then you can actually see this guy. It still did not run until now. It's gonna run soon. So let's just go back again to our Tekton dashboard, and then I'm gonna go to my task run. So you can see that after we executed the command oc create -f pipeline task run, after we created the task run, automatically Tekton detected that there is a new task to be executed, or that there is a new task run to be executed. You can see here not all steps in the task have finished executing. If you click on this guy, you can see that the npm echo message step completed, npm install, npm build also completed, and then we have the build push image. Basically Canico right now is executing my Docker file, and then it's actually going through the Docker file commands or steps over there, and then taking a snapshot, and then pushing the image to my registry. And then the last part here, you can see the deployment configs. There is no changes, so there is no update on the deployment config or routes or services. Okay, so now going back again to my OpenShift cluster, I can see that my pod was created. the last step, ran the image or ran the pod with the image. And then you can see here that the pod is running right now. And then if I click on the routes over here, then this is the host name to actually access the pod. So you can see that the changes has been reflected, okay, with the v2 version. Now ideally, as I mentioned before, is that whenever you push something to the GitHub repository, so ideally is that you will be using the webhooks functionality so that whenever you push any changes to your GitHub repository, Tekton CICD pipeline automatically is going to be running and executed without the need to actually go and create the OC or execute the OC create dash task run YAML file. Okay. What else can we talk about? I think really this is it for this tutorial. As I mentioned again, this is the repository. You can actually go and clone it, and then you can play and experiment with things. And I'm pretty sure also there are other examples available on GitHub on how to use Tekton pipeline. In the next tutorial, I'm going to talk about the pipeline and the pipeline runs, and how we can have multiple of tasks to run within our pipeline. So I hope this video was very helpful for you guys, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any question, please feel free to comment below in the comment section. Thank you so much for your time and for watching, and have a great day.